Gold just realized its biggest yearly gain since 2010, and Wall Street says it's going even higher. Heading into 2025, JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs are both forecasting $3,000 an ounce gold and paltry returns for stocks. Call the proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention the Still Report, and you'll always get best-in-class service from Patriots protecting patriots. Call 888-753-1647 for a free investor guide today. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer 7 years in a row. Call 888-753-1647. Well, hello, and so what we're going to talk about today is some of the problems that you all have had with directed energy weapons, which is now getting to be a little bit better accepted subject, I'll put it that way.
Well, I think they're spending what, 12 billion this year on it?
No, it's more like, so the people can Google, I should have actually brought up this as a reference, but if you Google directed energy weapon market analysis, there's a research company that's, doing all these market analyses of how big is the market, who are the biggest players, and directed energy weapons are roughly $50 billion industry. And that is just a publicly known section.
Yeah.
So anybody Googling directed energy weapons market analysis can bring up this site. And it shows you, actually, maybe I can just do it.
Wow, and that's all they'll admit to. I mean, what?
Exactly. That's the non-classified, publicly available. And also what I noticed, because I've been, here it is, Key Market Insights, Fortune Business Insights. That one talks about 22 billion, but what's interesting is they seem to be downplaying it at the moment, because a couple of years back, going back to 2019, the projection for in 2019 it had surpassed 22 billion. It was at 34 or something like that, and they predicted that by 2025 it would have reached 45 billion. So now these research companies talk about half, 22 billion. So part of that budget seems to have gone dark. But it is in either case, it is tens of billions of dollars. And the other thing people need to know is that directed energy weapons range from classical microwave weapons, which are super cheap and super easy. Any child can make a microwave weapon with a bit of electronics school knowledge, by taking, I don't advise it, it's very dangerous, but by taking out the microwave generating device inside a commercial microwave. So in the UK, I could buy a microwave for $15 in the local grocery store, and for, sorry, 15 pounds. And for 15 pounds, you can have the microwave emitter, take it out of the device, and you can use metal funnels to point it anywhere. Now that's already a directed energy weapon. It's a microwave weapon. That just costs you 15 pounds. And there were YouTube videos a couple of years back, maybe they're still out there, of teenagers doing experiments in their own home with just such devices, cooking bacon across the room and stuff like that. These experiments are horrifically dangerous because microwaves can cause significant damage. They can cook tissue, damage tissue perfectly. And at low energies, they cause cancer, they induce tumors. So I do not recommend it. But my point is that when you can make a stealth weapon with which you can commit the perfect crime for 15 pounds or whatever, $35 US dollars, then tens of billions are a lot of weaponry. It's the simplest microwave weapons are very cheap, and then of course there are more sophisticated ones.
Yeah, which gets down to some of the measurements we've been able to take with the spectrum analyzer we have, which only goes up to 4 gigahertz, not, and the spectrum they have, it goes up to 300 gigahertz. So, I mean, we're only looking at a fragment of the spectrum, but in there we have 2 very clear signals that are about 100 times the level of all the other signals in the environment. They're like between -40 and -35 dBm, which is it's supposed to be down around 50 to 60 dB, minus 50 to 60 dBm. Somewhere in that range is what's the FCC recommends and requires to be below in terms of satellite transmissions, things like that. And we're measuring these things here between 1.755 and 1.78 gigahertz and 300 to 300 point or 3 to 3.2 gigahertz. Those are those are identified by the Federal Communications Commission as allocated for use by the U.S. military. Now, and we've had those signals. They're line of sight signals. If you're on the horizon and you have a 6-foot antenna, it'll go like 14 miles or something like that. And that's about all you could, but you have to be able to see the target to radiate it. And we had these signals from our spectrum analyzer. They were hitting us in Maryland, and then we moved down here. And now we're down here a couple states away, and they're hitting us here. So these signals are moving with us, which means the military is shooting and radiating us with signals, and we don't even know why. Now, there are laws against this. The Department of Justice and the Department of Defense have regulations and laws governing experimentation on humans. And that means you have to get the informed consent of the humans involved in the experiment, whatever it is. So we have never agreed to any kind of testing with radiation with the government in any form whatsoever. So we're being radiated here without our permission.
This is almost comical, except it's not.
No, I mean, it's and we're pretty sure it's not satellite because there are zones of the spectrum that are also designated for Earth to space and space to Earth, you know. And again, they have the regulations on the power level and things like that, and this is far exceeding that. So, I mean, it's not from satellite. If it were, it would be radiating the whole hemisphere, basically.
Yeah, at least a spot size of 1.5 miles.
Yeah.
And
if you went to a spot beam, something like that, yeah. But the point is that would be a lot of power to use in space. And so it's not, but according to the FCC, it's not in the range that's allocated for space to Earth or Earth to space. So,
well, we have more evidence than
yes,
that.
because
with directional antenna in Maryland, we managed to track one signal and it was doing a figure of 8. So you're holding a directional antenna and the peak intensity you're measuring is basically when you're just holding it stationary, it's increasing and decreasing. And as you're moving it with time, you can map out that whatever is irradiating you is doing a figure of 8. So if you're moving your antenna in a figure of 8, you can always keep maximum intensity. In other words, it is a fixed wing drone above our house. So we had that. Now the problem is that these drones are visually camouflaged. So in addition to directed energy weapons, there are several technologies the public doesn't know about. So there's the directed energy weapons themselves, and as I said, they range from a $35 microwave weapon to more sophisticated weapons. But in terms of visual camouflage, recently certain technologies have been made public. One was even presented on the Gutfeld show, I think, on Fox. And you can use certain shielding materials that make you look invisible. So you see the background behind you, but not, the actual object. So there's YouTube videos with people demonstrating these invisibility cloaks. And a grown man can just stand in front of the shield and you just see the wall behind it. So the person truly becomes invisible. So we can also share some.
It doesn't really take some type of invisibility technology for a drone to be invisible. I have a drone that can go up to 15,000 feet. At 15,000 feet,
altitude is the key.
It's absolutely invisible.
Yeah, but the problem is really precision because the actual the pulsed energy projectiles, which we're going to get onto, so the energy bundles that these drones shoot at us are very collimated. So from the bruising that they cause on victims, it's roughly the size of a coin. So that sort of
the size of what?
Of a
quarter.
coin or quarter.
Yeah.
So a coin of money. That's roughly the beam size and the impact size on the victims, as can be seen in bruising from drone gunning and stuff like that. And it can go all the way down to something that's more like the tip of a pencil. So at that precision level, you can't be too high. So in principle, you can go to any altitude, but these drones are much closer than people know. in actual fact. And all I'm saying is that from the figure of 8 and how quickly it was moving through the figure of 8, that thing was a lot closer above our house than you would necessarily, have to be absolutely invisible. And the problem is that we have a lot of occasions when on a clear day, blue sky, we are being hit. We can hear the impact sounds that follow, especially me around. So whatever room I'm in, it's going to shoot the ceiling above my head. And if I go outside, there's nothing I can see. But if we turn on the spectrum analyzers, we can see that something is irradiating us from above. So that's the problem. And I have been searching for a very long time for technologies that could explain how they pull this off. So in principle, you can have a drone fairly close by. If you paint the underside nitrogen blue, at a very short distance, you can't see it very well. Now, these drones that we're talking about, they have to have a certain size. So we're not talking civilian toy drones, or like a realtor would have one to just photograph the neighborhood. So it's not those small things we're talking about. So we're really talking about something sturdier, a bit bigger, military size. So not exactly a predator drone, but maybe a baby predator drone that can carry these weapons. So that's roughly the size we're looking at. And in terms of a measurement, so the information we have comes from, as we said, spectrum analyzers, just monitoring the spectrum, directional electromagnetic measuring devices where we can, with the directional antenna, map out the path of that thing, and we saw a figure of 8. Visually, only once did Bill and I actually manage to see a drone in Maryland. It was at night, and it was camouflaged as a star. So camouflaging drones with onboard lighting as a star is actually quite common. There's newspaper articles about that. But the only reason we spotted it is because you used to live just a few miles from the airport.
About 8 miles from the airport.
Yeah, and this drone was blinking white twice and red twice. So we were just standing outside, looking up above our house, looking for some drone because there had been just horrific attacks. And I said, hang on, Bill, isn't that light spot above that tree blinking red? And he said, oh yeah, it's blinking twice. So together, independently, we looked and we both saw it flash red twice and white or neutral twice.
Yeah, if I had to estimate, I would have thought it was between 500 and 1,000 feet up. My guess. That's a guess.
Of course, that would be below what the FAA automatically trace and come down on.
We did talk to the FAA people at Friendship, and because we thought it was a danger to flights coming in and out of the airport, and they did when we sent them notes about the timing and all, they looked at the records they had on radar for that time period, and they couldn't find it. So,
but more than that, they also refused to send out the investigators.
They didn't send anybody out to investigate anything anyway.
Talking just about directed energy weapons, so the sort of symptoms that people need to, or effects that people need to look for if they are thinking that they might be affected by directed energy weapons is, number one, any odd medical symptoms. For example, medical symptoms that are geographically localized. For example, you walk past a window, and every time you walk past the window, you just feel dizzy, or you feel the side of your head is burning, or something like that. So anything that indicates it's actually a beam. So the different types, there are pulses and there are beams, continuous beams. And typically I say to victims, if you feel pain, just try turning around quickly. Does the pain or the burning kind of move? So it stays localized in space, but it moves across your body, stuff like that. Other ways to test this is if you move and the pain transfers from one half of the body to the other, because the two sides of the body are being read out by two opposite sides of the brain. So even if it's something medical, any physical symptoms can't just hop from one side of the body to the other. That's just not how medical effects work. So as soon as you have any sort of sensations that are like that, geographically located, or they jump from one side of the body to the other, you are most likely dealing with a directed energy weapon beam. Now, in terms of their reach, already classical microwaves can easily go 2 or 3 walls at perfect intensity. So I think it reduces. I forgot the actual transmission ratios, but I think either you drop down to a quarter of intensity, or it drops down by a quarter. I have to look it up exactly. But either way, you can just crank up the power and reach somebody 2 or 3 walls inside the home. And this is also the reason why, for example, cell phones work in the basement. You can easily radiate through the floors above you directly straight to the next cell phone tower with maybe one bounce off a wall or something like that, a small reflection. And you can reach the next cell tower and make a phone call. And similarly, because cell phone communication is microwave, you can have microwave weapons at higher intensity shooting you in the basement, burning you in the basement, by having a collimated beam just radiate through several walls of the home. So all that is well-known
And a
physics.
beam would be vertical in nature, and you're indicating one that would come horizontally, which is not explained by the technology that you've already described.
Oh, no, I mean, if you have, for example, a microwave emitter and you take a funnel, you can turn the funnel and the beam will point wherever you want it to be. So it is typically vertical when it's a drone that's shooting straight down, but a drone can shoot diagonally as well. So any sort of electromagnetic.
Requires a lot more altitude.
Well, yeah, yes and no, because sometimes, for example, you can just move a drone to be able to shoot through a window or shoot through a window and diagonally
You have to
down.
be able to see
Yeah.
the target. That's
Yeah.
that's the criteria.
Well,
Yeah.
regarding the seeing the target, another piece of technology that the public doesn't really know about is so-called through-the-wall radar. Now, a couple of years back, Lawrence Livermore Lab, or aka Weapons Lab, had a happy little YouTube video where they were showcasing their technologies and what they were developing. And one of them was a radar device, and they were advertising it as a little cute device you can put on the back of a pickup truck, and you can drive it downtown and make a floor plan of a high rise. Now, nobody needs this technology because by the time you build the high rise, you have the floor plan, right? All the contractors have it. So this is nonsense. And one of the things that this YouTube video didn't mention is that you don't just get the floor plan or with these microwaves. You can basically do almost like, like radar. You can map out things in 3 dimensions with classical radar. You can do the same thing with microwaves. But the one thing Lawrence Livermore lab did not emphasize is that you can see every person inside that high rise. So you can just park a little innocuous pickup truck, irradiate the building, and find out exactly where people are and see them live anywhere inside that high rise. In the bathroom, in their bedrooms, And for victims, concretely, what it means is that even if you have an apartment and you are away from windows somewhere inside, a drone can just use through-the-wall radar and locate you precisely and shoot you precisely with a pulsed beam. In Europe alone, we had thousands and thousands of victim testimonies and victim cases, all of them reporting pretty much exactly the same thing. And none of them managed to get a lawyer to take a case.
That would imply what size weapon, though?
Well, in terms of the size, so when we're talking a classical microwave weapon like a child could build and demonstrate on YouTube, it fits in the palm of your hand. That's a microwave weapon. So that's the emitter in your microwave if you take it apart.
That'll go through a wall.
That can go through walls. That is just the microwave generator. If we're talking more sophisticated weapons, there are different technologies. There's, for example, you can shoot people with charged particle beams. Now, I have seen at a technology fair in Germany, I have seen one device being advertised, and it was tabletop, but we're talking a small tabletop. So you can easily fit it onto a writing desk, a standard size writing office desk. And that is the beam line, the acceleration line, all the hardware, all the technology. And I think back then I asked about the price, and he said it's about $500,000. So for $500,000. Now that was years and years ago. We're going back maybe 10 years, right? So since then the price has come down. Now, could a particle beam like that fit on a drone? Oh yeah, easy. That would fit on a baby Predator drone without question.
Well, it would have to be battery powered.
Yeah, something like that. But that's not really a problem depending on how much you want to generate, because the other thing is that, for example, microwaves do not take that much energy to generate, really. If you want to have low level depending on what you want to do. If you want to give somebody accelerated cancer by irradiating the same organ or body part day and night, that doesn't even take that much energy. If you want to have really something that, you know, has a lot of oomph, okay, maybe you can operate it for 2-3 hours, and then you have to have the next drone take over. But even that, having a continuous exchange of drones is not that hard to do. And I say that because a couple of years ago, Mark Zuckerberg was floating the idea to provide internet to rural areas of Africa by using drones. So that would be a fleet of drones that is continuously above your area, and your internet comes through Wi-Fi from the drone, right? When we're talking about, I mean, the rural parts of Africa are vast. If you can do that, you can easily, you know, do the same thing for a couple of thousands of, you know, high value targets who you want to terrorize day and night.
Now you have to couple that with the implication of all the drones that are flying up and down the East Coast here.
Yeah.
What is the capability there? You know, is this part of that testing? I don't know.
I doubt it. I don't think we're part of any testing. We're part of deployment, Bill.
Oh, for us, for what they're doing to us, I think it's implemented.
Yeah.
Right. But for the rest of the country, maybe they're just testing the wide area stuff.
Transparent. If you have a, let's say, a so-called targeted individual, somebody who goes through all these crimes, well, you can test. You can have individual contracts testing microwaves or whatever directed energy weapon in vivo on a live target. You can test it on their brain, their kidney, their pancreas, right, their liver. You can have special research contracts for every organ in their body and systematically destroy it and see how long does it take with a certain frequency, a certain intensity, whatever you want to test, to just destroy that organ. When this victim goes to a doctor and does any tests, well, the medical file and the medical results are digital and are being automatically read out, collected, and stored by NSA. So it's, you know, you have a perfect loop where you can just pick somebody out there in the community, just say, we're going to test this technology on them. You just fly a drone or you put a microwave next to their bedroom, say, in a neighbor's home who you paid off. And then you can run all these contracts. You can irradiate their brain, their liver, their kidney, see what gives in first, and read out their medical files. And this way, you don't have any legal liability. The actual medical cost of your experimentation is entirely borne by the victim. And you can do anything you like. So in terms of business plans, this is such a lucrative one. The intelligence agencies would be fools not to do it almost.
Other than a whistleblower.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and she's the physicist, so that she takes care of the physics of it. I'm the mathematician. Like, for example, that signal 1.755 to 1.78 gigahertz has 17 tones, but one tone is never active. There's 9 tones active and then 1 not, and then 7 active. So if you just thought about combinations of tones, nothing else, as probabilities, how many things could you address with that? That's 17 factorial variations of tone pattern, which means, you know, 17 times 16 times 15 times 14, which is over 1.7 trillion, as I think is the number, combinations of things that you could address individually. So if you were talking about people, you could address 1.7 trillion people uniquely with the tonal patterns.
I guess what you haven't mentioned is that these are electromagnetic frequencies that could, for example, dial up a covert non-consensual chip in somebody.
Yes, which we can get to now.
Yeah.
But also the one at 3 to 3.2 gigahertz has a 200 tone pattern, which means that could be up to 200 factorial combination, which is simply off the charts. I mean, if you put 1,000 chips in every individual in the planet, they could still address each one individually and still have plenty of space to address more. I mean, that's how that kind of thing could work. I'm not saying it is, but you know, I just think of the mathematics of it. That's all.
Well, what we have in terms of evidence is that we have these two two frequency zones. So one is roughly around between 1.7 and 1.8 gigahertz, and the other one is starting just under 3 gigahertz and up. Now, both are registered with the military. The first one, around 1.7, 1.8 gigahertz, is specifically registered as electronic warfare. Now, that
research, yeah.
Well, not just research, they call it electronic warfare and the FCC
Yes,
tables. Anybody can look this
electronic
up.
warfare research.
Anybody can find on Google the PDF with all the frequencies that the FCC has licensed, and this frequency is specifically licensed for so-called electronic warfare. Now, the question is, what does that mean? Is it really just irradiating somebody, or is it maybe communicating with their covert chips that they don't even know they have? Now, how many people might have covert chips? Well, I think it was 2012, the FDA approved that microchips can be put into pills and tablets. That's in 2012.
They claim it's so that doctors can ensure their patients are taking the medication properly.
It's to ensure compliance.
Yeah.
Compliance is a very creepy word indeed, right?
Yeah.
Because you consent to your medical treatment and there's no compulsion that you actually take the advice of your doctor. It's just advice, right? So when they feel that they have to put chips in to check compliance, that is like a subjugation process. And really, do they care? They don't really want to make anybody healthier. Once you pay for the medicine, who cares if you take it? It's your problem. So the FDA approving microchips is really the rollout of a slavery program. They want these microchips in people's guts, and some chips are small enough to get through the even the blood-brain barrier.
Now, we don't know what's in the tones of these signals because we don't have you'd have to have a program to diarize, to translate all that transmission into something meaningful. And even then, it's probably encoded or encrypted in some form, and you need to get through that. So there's a number of things you'd have to do to get through to find out what really is going on there and what they're really kinds of information or what they're using those tones for. I'm just saying there's 17 tones in the one that you can see peaks of energy in that signal, and in the others like 200. So you'd have to look at each one individually to figure out what's going on and diarize it and analyze it and try to break through the codes and things like that. There's a layer of things you have to get through. It's nation state stuff that has to happen to find out what those things are doing,
So in other words, you could have done it while you were still at NSA, but as a private person, to really figure out what exactly they are doing is impossible. The technology alone is too expensive for anybody to
just
afford.
for us to try to buy a spectrum analyzer above 4 gigahertz is 60,000 or more than that.
Hang on, that was the drone. That was the so-called drone defender. If you really want to be able to prove that it's a drone and where the drone exactly is, it's like a dome technology. It has little what's it called? Little segments where it's monitoring the sky, and it can actually show you, hey, the drone is over there, right?
Oh, that's a different thing.
Yeah. Now that thing costs $60,000. You can buy it privately. It's kind of the stuff that the Donald Trump's car convoy has. One of the cars has like a black dome. Well, that's exactly this. It's a drone monitoring device that costs 60,000 peanuts for Donald Trump and the US president, but for a private person, you can't expect every victim to fork out that sort of money. And it would be just one of the many technologies that you would need to really conclusively prove that this is going on.
What you really need is a wideband spectrum monitor that covers multiple gigahertz, and you monitor them simultaneously, everything in that range, the frequency range. So, but then you could see different peaks hitting at the same time, and then perhaps figure out there's a signal being sent down on many different signals simultaneously across that spectrum. And there are ways to try to figure that out but again, that's nation state technology, and it's really expensive.
And by nation state technology, you mean that only nation states would have both the funding and the research ability to go after that?
Yeah, so far, yeah. That's basically it, yeah.
So really, in summary, there's one more technology, I think, for the interest of the audience, we should mention. This is the pulsed energy projectiles. That's really novel physics, I suspect, based on the features. But before that, if we just pause and I take a step back and realize what has happened is that classification allowed one section of society comprising hundreds of thousands of people. I think 250,000 people have top secret clearances. Last time I read about that. So 250,000 of people have top secret clearances. And those with top secret clearances have access to this technology. They know what this consists of. Maybe there's levels of classification above that and not everybody gets given it. But in principle, that is the number of people who would know what's going on. They can build companies using this technology. They can do industrial, not just industrial espionage. They can eliminate business competitors by killing them, by committing the perfect crime. So we have a bifurcation of society with the insiders on the one side and the non-insiders on the other side. Now, the insiders can use the resources of the US government. Hey, we've just heard about US AID, right? And how they were using billions of dollars. The same will happen in the military and the intelligence agencies. So they can develop the technology, build the technology, then leave government, found a private company, and offer these services that we will kill whatever business competitor, annoying neighbor, former lover, whoever, using stealth technology that is physically impossible for the victim to prove and trace back to you.
But you've
Now
survived.
that,
You have
well, as
survived.
long as they want to, we have survived. But for example, a former colleague of Bill's, Karen Melton Stewart, she was permanently debilitated last year so that she cannot communicate with us. We don't know her status. So they let us live as long as they want to. And the victim organizations, the charities in Europe and US, they have entire lists of victims who have already been murdered. So it's it's called non-lethal weapons, but they are very lethal at the twist of a button. That's the problem.
Well,
Or like
how
spinning
much
of a dial.
how much worse of a troublemaker do you have to be than you two by exposing this stuff in order to get the deadly version?
Well, you see, part of the degree of safety I think we have is because we are public about it. And the more public you are, I think it affords you some form of protection because people know about it. And I basically said, if anything happens to me, it's the intelligence community doing it. So they'll know who did it, and they don't want that kind of advertising, I guess. At
So,
least they're not prepared to accept it.
since when has that stopped them?
I
Yeah.
I know that. Well, I mean, I've gone through any number of things here in my life. After I retired from NSA and after the Department of Justice and the FBI falsified evidence and attacked me and others, I went through any number of biological attacks, and I'm under pain control right now because of the implants I've got in my legs. And it's really, I mean, my pain doctor said he's never seen anything like this. But it's like 4 parallel points on each of both of my stumps, the lower stump. I have both legs amputated, and I've got 4 points in parallel positions on both legs where this pain occurs. They're point pains, they're not area pains. And I could put my finger over each of them and say that's where it's coming from, here and there. And in one case, we did have an X-ray of it and found a shadow in there. And we tried to get people to take it out, but nobody would help us do that.
Yeah.
We couldn't find a doctor that would help us remove that thing because it was right where the pain was. I put my finger right over it and said, and there's that shadow on the
A foreign
on the
object.
X-ray.
Yeah, there's a foreign object that one can see. But in terms of evidence for Bill's chips, I mean, first of all, Bill lost both his lower legs in 2 independent flesh-eating bacterial infections. Now, he had a total of 12 flesh-eating bacterial infections, which started a couple of months after the FBI raid on him in
The
2007.
next year, I was
Yeah.
raided in 2007. That started in August. Well, almost a year later,
Yeah.
to the exact day.
Since 2008, I think your flesh-eating bacterial infection stopped when? 2023? I think it was 23 because
23.
we got married and he kept having these flesh-eating bacterial infections that would eat a huge crater into his leg or a massive tunnel in the shortest amount of time. I've never seen anything like it. And then I said, Bill, I think they're breaking in at night and injecting you with a highly loaded pathogen here, probably a bioweapon, a flesh-eating bioweapon they developed because it was progressing faster than anything was natural. And eventually we deadbolted everything from the inside, including our bedroom door. So our bedroom is like Fort Knox, and that's when it stopped. That's when Bill recovered from the last big old infection. So, when you have 12, you can run a statistical analysis and say, what is the probability that somebody gets a flesh-eating infection? It's basically vanishingly small. To lose one limb is even rarer, but to lose two limbs, not in the same infection, but two completely independent infections, is unheard of. But to have 12, that is just impossible. So in other words, we can prove that this was the intelligence agencies, and ultimately blocking them out was the way that Bill managed to be healthy for the first time.
Well, and I had friends of mine who had suggested that I was the subject of biological warfare because they had been in that area in the military. So
Yeah.
that was their suggestion right up front.
Yeah. So when I came along, and
How do you explain that you look healthier now than you have since, I don't know, how long have I known you for? 12 or 13 years?
Something like that, yeah. Yep.
You look healthier now than you ever have since I've known you.
That's because I'm getting more and more pissed off at my government.
No,
Yes. Yes.
anger does not make you healthier.
It gives you a motive to stay and keep going. That's what it does.
I don't believe that.
It's a war.
You're looking
And
healthier.
it takes two sides to quit, and I'm not done.
Okay, that's
Well, I mean, they lied about me in federal court. And we found the evidence to show that they lied and that they were doing malicious prosecution. And we said, well, okay, let's go to court. We're going to charge you with this. Let's go. And they ran away. And I haven't heard from them since.
But that was back in 2008.
That was, that was 2010.
2010.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's when you started losing your legs, aren't you?
Well, 2 years later, yeah.
Yeah, 2010, 2013.
Yeah.
But I think that the point is that with all of these things, even though it takes really ultimately nation state level technology to pin it down perfectly, if you really want to decode what the control signal is that's being sent to your body chips or whatever, yes, that takes a lot of money. But what I want victims to know is that there's a lot of very cheap, affordable stuff that you can do to prove that something is going on. So, for example, as I said, if you are wondering, am I being tortured by remote control through chips or through directed energy weapons, both of which have been proven in many victims, right? The test is, if it's a beam or pulse being shot at you from a weapon, there has to be a beam line. So if you turn your head, do you feel the pain suddenly on the back of your head or the back of your shoulders, wherever? So can you make out a beam line? And then there's also objective evidence. For example, in terms of directed energy weapons, classical microwaves can be completely reflected with just one layer of metal foil. So aluminum foil, right? Alu foil, that completely 100% blocks classical microwaves. So if you feel like you're being burnt, you're sitting at, I don't know, you're sitting at your desk chair and suddenly you can feel a side of your body being burned and it looks like it's coming through the window, just hold up alufoil and see, do you feel better? Because if you do, it means, yes, indeed, a drone or your neighbors are radiating you with a classical microwave weapon. Now, in terms of more sophisticated weaponry, there's something called pulsed energy projectiles. I think that's even the expression that the military use in their own documentation. Yeah. So pulsed energy projectiles can be two things. You can have bundles of charged particles and shoot them in a pulse. That can cause quite a bit of damage. So you can have particle pulses, right? Particle bursts, but there seems to be a second technology that seems to be purely electromagnetic. I couldn't detect any particle showers. And those pulsed energy projectiles seem to be using novel physics that was classified. I suspect personally it's using Tesla physics. So people might not know, but when Tesla died, he died in a New York hotel room and the FBI raided it and stole all his papers, basically. So all the Tesla papers were taken by the FBI. And to my knowledge, it was John Trump, the uncle of Donald Trump, who was at MIT at the time, and he was tasked with working through these papers. So they wanted to know, they needed somebody clever to actually understand what Tesla was working on. And I suspect that John Trump was the person who went through this, explained it to them what it was, and that all that work was classified. And I think that is what is turning, what has turned into these pulsed energy projectiles. Now, what I mean concretely is the following. When you have a classical electromagnetic wave, an electromagnetic wave, you have the photon traveling in one direction. Its field, its force lines are electric and magnetic. So electromagnetic together, but they are always at exact 90 degrees angles to each other. So if this middle finger is the line of travel of a photon, the electric and the magnetic field lines are all at 90 degrees. What that means concretely is that light cannot give you a longitudinal momentum. Light cannot impact on something and punch a hole in it. It's physically impossible. It is completely verboten according to the Maxwell's equations as we have them right now, and as the physics that would be taught at places like Oxford, right? So any university will tell you it is not possible. However, if there are certain higher level solutions to Maxwell equations, maybe in a higher order term 1 or 2, you can suddenly have wave solutions, so waves that are completely in agreement with our laws of electromagnetism that can have longitudinal force fields, right? So what it means concretely is that then you could have a high energy electromagnetic beam and say punch a hole into something. You can already do that with particles like electrons and protons. You can shoot that at the target and punch a hole in it. But with these novel electromagnetic solutions to the wave equation, you could, in principle, also be able to do that with an electromagnetic wave, which would make it even more powerful than a particle beam. And I have collected video evidence and measurements that seem to imply that that's exactly the case. Now, concretely, a spectacular example that happened, which was witnessed by Bill and by me, was in Maryland. So I was being irradiated and gunned so hard in our second floor bedroom that I couldn't take it at night. We were already using shielding. We had put alu foil, like a canopy, above the bed. Bill had even heard impacts moving along in a straight line.
Yeah, it was like something came along and was searching. It was it made an impact, and then that impact kept like repeating for about 3 feet across the top of the foil. It went right across the bed.
So you hear suddenly on the alufoil, bang, 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 something is impacting. Now, at that point, I said, right, that's it. We're moving the bedroom into the basement. So we went down into the basement, and also we bought about 8 whiteboards that have these thick metal backs. That was the cheapest way to get really large, sizable sizes of metal. And we put them on the ground floor. So basically above the bedroom area in the basement. Now, one night, we were downstairs and suddenly we heard 2 heck almighty impact sounds. It was like 2 bangs on the ground floor. And when we went upstairs, we found that there were 2 holes punched through the sheet metal that was on the ground. So it would have been a clean headshot had it gone straight through, but instead it punched holes into the sheet metal. So, but the thing is, there was no holes on the roof or the ceiling of the second floor. There was no other holes. How the hell do you punch holes into sheet metal without punching holes into the walls or the roof of the building? Now that, in my analysis, maybe I screwed up my energy deposition calculation, but I think that is not possible to do with charged particle beams, because as soon as a charged particle beam goes through any material, there are secondary showers, it starts being dispersed. It's not that easy. However, if you have a novel electromagnetic waveform with fancy properties, you can focus in on a deeper level inside a material and punch holes into that sheet metal and not deposit as much energy in the layers before. That's what I'm talking about. So it's kind of it's horrifying. It sounds crazy. And yet we've got the whiteboard with these holes in it. We heard it. There was video CCTV running at the time. So this whole scene was recorded. We reported it to the police and they proceeded not to give a rat's tail. So putting all of this together, we're fairly sure we were targeted by the military, and it was probably an assassination attempt. And they just hit, instead of punching holes into our brains, they punched holes into sheet metal.
But I'm looking at a guy who's looking better every time I interview him. So
Let's hope it stays that
doesn't
way.
make sense.
Let's hope it stays that way. Huh?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have a metal mirror in our bedroom that keeps pinging at about between 2 and 3 in the morning every morning. So whatever's being shot at it is hitting the thing and making a sound in our bedroom.
Well,
Ping,
also, your
ping.
wife has to sleep with
Yeah,
two military metal helmets, one inside the other.
Yeah.
I have a US and a German Second World War metal helmet inside each other, and I sleep with that. And Bill frequently hears the shots impacting on those metal
on the helmets. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, you go. It's hard to believe that this shit is happening, but it is.
Yeah, it is.
I can't get over the picture of this.
I know. I can't get over the picture of it. It's like going to bed with a soup bowl.
Talk about aluminum foil hats.
We're way past that.
We're way past that, buddy.
Yeah. By the way,
we got copper.
This is why I didn't want to do this interview, because it's going to destroy your reputation and all the other videos that you've done.
Well, not really, because we have evidence. We have video evidence.
Look, we've got the spectrum analyzer output. We've got all of that recorded and documented. Yeah. We can document all of that in court of law.
By the way, bit of background information. So microwave experiments on microwaves. So the microwaves were developed 1940s, but by the 1950s, they were already doing covert human experimentation on victims. A lot of them American. The way they did that is to put a microwave emitter in an apartment above or next to a victim. And the brain was the very first thing that they studied, because they wanted to use microwaves for behavioral modification. They already had evidence that you can create uncontrollable aggression, even uncontrollable sexual violence in men who are not, usually like that. So it was huge power. But when they were doing these classical old microwave experiments, people's school education was a lot better back then. And a lot of people knew that if you use metal, you can, they felt the burning and you can block it out. So that's exactly what they did. They would wrap their head in alufoil and it would be 100% effective, because it was just classical microwave. So tinfoil hat goes back to that time in the 50s and 60s when alufoil still had tin in it. It doesn't have any more tin in it. So tinfoil hat dates the whole thing, and it perfectly coincides with the CIA's mind control experimentation and covert non-consensual experimentation with microwaves. So the expression tinfoil hat is direct proof that this shit's been happening for a very long time, in fact. And I can tell you these days, alufoil is not enough. So I have upgraded to two helmets.
Yeah, and we use Faraday cages and stuff goes right through it.
Yeah, but also we have video evidence showing this shit banging and pinging on my head.
There's audio, video,
There's one video online where that was recorded in my apartment in Zurich. I have a tinfoil hat. I've wrapped my head in aluminum, but I also have an aluminum foil sheet in front of my face because I was being shot from a high rise across the street. And they were shooting straight through my metal shed that I slept in. And there's a video recording of me putting this in front of my face, and you can hear the impact sound on the foil, and you can see the foil move as I'm being shot in the face. So we have all this evidence about this technology actually existing. Another thing that your audience should know is that when I started researching this it was in January 2016. So I have researched this for almost a decade now. After a couple of years, I offered consulting and counseling services to victims, and I was contacted by people you don't even believe. So I spoke to Hollywood actors, I spoke to people of public life, none of whom I can or will name ever, but I spoke to judges. So there are judges in the United Kingdom and in the US who are victims of these attacks. So if you're wondering why maybe, judges come up with corrupt decisions, it's not just because they get paid. A lot of them get threatened. They get shot with these fancy schmancy weapons, and they are not physicists like me. They don't even know what hit them, quite literally. So it is of utmost importance that people understand that yes, these stealth weapons exist. Yes, they are tens of billions dollar industry. They have capabilities that most people can't even believe or imagine, but yet they are being used, against everybody. I have, people who consulted me who were really people whose name you would recognize out there, but also single mothers of autistic children who are clearly being targeted because they're being experimented on, and their child is being experimented on because the mothers find the bruises, the burn marks on their child. So we're dealing with this huge covert military machinery of 250,000 people who can access the information about this stuff and can basically build business plans on the back of the rest of society and use them for whatever they want to.
Well, I'm looking at two people who are exceedingly healthy looking.
Healthy
I don't
looking.
know about, I haven't seen you so much over time, but I have seen Bill a lot over time, and he's getting healthier looking. So whatever they're doing should be used as a health improver.
Maybe it's my genetics really that's making the difference.
But it's my contribution,
And,
Bill. I
no
got
matter
wait a
what,
minute.
diabetes. Hello.
My genetics and my wife who is
Yeah.
insisting I eat certain foods and
Yeah.
don't eat others. So
Your wife who got you out of diabetes type 2.
she did. I had diabetes. I don't have type 2 diabetes anymore. And basically I
Yes.
threw away all those damn pills and now I don't pay, I'm not contributing to all that money to a pharmaceutical industry. In fact, I refuse to pay for pills that cost more than $10, my copay. That's
Yeah.
it. That's my limit.
so
Yeah.
as many people who are crazy and go to the doctors and say, I'm hearing these pings, you're going to have other people. Now you're ensuring that other people will go to their doctor and say, give me what they've got.
Yeah. It's not a pill. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is the pill society, but it's not a pill. I'm sorry, that doesn't work.